and welcome to this episode of Stimming and Stilettos with Dr. Tasha. Okay, and you guys know how I do it, right? I only bring you the best, you know. um, so it's the latest episode of Stimming and Stilettos, y'all, and you guys, every time I get a guest, you guys know I do a little happy dance around my office. But this time she found me. You guys already know that I was doing a little happy dance, right? So she came to my website. Y'all already know. So we're going to talk about all the things. And so Orietta, and I got her name right, y'all. I practiced beforehand because you already know, like my name gives everybody fits because it's not spelled like you would normally find Natasha. So you guys know I had to practice. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I just, you made my day. Okay, I just really want you to know you made my day. I love it when women in STEM, minority women in STEM, want to tell their story because we should, because we're out here, we have stories to tell, and they need to be told. So thank you for just stepping up and saying, "Hey, here I am. Please have me on the show." So thank you for just volunteering. Yes.
Yes, I love it.
Okay, so please tell us your STEM story.
Yeah, absolutely. My STEM story starts out with a girl who got rejected to go to kindergarten. I was I was 4 years old, and you know how there's a kinder deadline, and so my kinder deadline, I think my birthday was like 2 weeks later from the kinder deadline. And my best friend down the street was starting kindergarten. And so the teacher comes to my house to do like the kindergarten test. And she's asking me questions. And she asked me, "How many fingers and toes do you have?" And I was quiet for a little bit. And then she goes, "You can take your shoes off if you need to." But I didn't know how to count. Right. And so I didn't get into kindergarten that year, and I was like so disappointed. But my dad, what he started to do is when he would come home from work, we would sit down at the dining table, and with raw pinto beans, he started teaching me to count. And through that year, the counting turned into addition and then turned into subtraction. And so my STEM story really started with this kind of love for math.
Yeah.
But more so, the drive of it was because of a rejection I got as a little girl.
Love that. So I feel like you're one of your STEM story started with pinto beans.
Yes.
I just love that. But you know what I love even more about that story is that, I mean, we could say it started with a rejection, but really it started with, a kind of a drive for learning. It's sort of like there was this innate desire for you to say, you know what, I want that. Like I want to be someplace where learning is happening. And so in order for that to happen, you had to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also had a parent who was willing to teach me and spend time with me to do that.
That's even better. That's even better. Yeah.
And so when I got to kindergarten, one day I was playing at the money station that my Mrs. Miller had, Mrs. Miller. And she had coins, right? Fake play coins. And one day I was looking at the coins and I was playing with them, and I got really excited because I felt like I discovered that there's multiple ways to make $1 with coins. So I go to Miss Miller and I'm like, "Mrs. Miller, did you know that you can make $1 with 4 quarters or 10 dimes or 20 nickels?" I was so excited about this discovery. And she's like, "Yes, Orietta, yes, there's more, go back." So I go back and I'm like, "That's weird. Like, how do you do more?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I started playing around and I would come back, 2 quarters, 2 quarters and 5 dimes. And I kept going. And she's like, "There's more."
Mm.
And that really, her encouragement and feeding my curiosity really helped me to understand, like, one, like there's multiple ways to solve a problem, and just get my critical thinking skills in there. And I think the thing that I discovered the most of that was at the end of that, I realized that when I would go to the gas station down the street and I'd pay for the dollar for the candy, that it didn't matter what coins they would give me. What mattered was that the change was the exact change.
Mm.
And so I learned that there was practical, like there was a practical, there was something useful with math, because by that time I just thought it was just counting, and adding and subtracting was just math.
Right.
But now there's this practical usage of math.
Right. Right.
And so my like love for math was really my foundation into like my STEM journey. When I got to high school, I had a math teacher, Mr. Gonzalez, and he one day had said, hey, Arizona State University has this math and science program. And it's a program in the summer where you go and you could take a math class or a science class. And she's like, go and take, I think you should sign up for this class, right? I was probably, I think I just finished my sophomore year, and I had gone, I'm from a small town. I'm from rural Arizona. I grew up in small mining and farming communities. My hometown is about like 10,000 people in southern Arizona. And I had gone to like the next biggest little town next to me because I lived like an hour away from the city, and I had to take this test to test into this thing. And it was like, do as many math problems as you can in the allotted time and show all your work. And I tested into calculus. And so I started when I got to ASU, everybody was on these long lines, and I'm like in the long waiting, and they're like, oh no, you're in calculus, which was the highest class that they had. And I'm like, what? And I loved it because calculus is like my favorite probably math subject. And I loved it. But what I learned while I was on campus was that I really did want to go to college, and living there and being with the students. And I was like, this is the next thing to do. And my parents are immigrants. They're Mexican immigrants. I'm the fourth of 5 kids. My oldest sister was the first one in our family to go to college. And actually, she kind of instilled in the rest of us that college is the next thing to do after high school, right? So when I graduated, I went to ASU. I was an undecided major, and I had like 5 things I wanted to do. I wanted to do math. I wanted to do engineering. I wanted to do business. I wanted to do astronomy, and I wanted to do film. And so I had a film class, astronomy class. I had a business class. I was already in, I don't know, some high-level calculus class, right? But I was undecided.
Wow.
And
Yes, I see that. You were undecided.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I thought I had 4 years to decide a major, because no one told me that you needed to decide it when you started.
Yikes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I had in the bottom of my residence hall on the first floor was the academic advisor for the undecided. And he meets with me, and he's like, essentially was like, in a very gentle way, was like, what are you doing? And you find a major like by the end of this semester.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, you got, what is it? 16 weeks. You got,
yeah, 16 weeks to decide your life, right?
Yes. Decide now.
Yeah. And so I went and tried to figure out what of these 5. A couple months later, I was very proud of myself, because I was like, hey, Osaro, I'm going to do engineering. I was very proud to tell him that. And then he says, which one?
Oh, right.
And I was like,
there's still a choice.
There's many. I was like, what?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up choosing industrial engineering, and I got my undergrad in industrial engineering. And a lot of it was there was a foundation of math. I had a focus in international business. So three of the five things that I wanted to do kind of encompass within that degree.
Got it. That's actually a really smart choice. I see it. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I was an undergrad, I did a study abroad in Mexico. I went to Monterrey, to study at Tec de Monterrey, and I was studying international business there. And when I was there, I was around a lot of international students. And at that point, I was like, wow, there's so much of the world I want to see. And growing up in Southern Arizona, I would always be in Mexico with my family. But outside of Arizona, New Mexico, Mexico, I hadn't really left or been other
Right.
places, right? I
Right.
hadn't gotten exposed. And now, being a student in Mexico, I'm exposed to these international students from all over the place. And now my curiosity to travel and my curiosity to learn about other cultures kind of like
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that for you. I love that you were able to sort of take all of, well, the majority of your loves and kind of marry them into a major, into a career actually, where you could at least entertain and kind of juggle them all in a way that is kind of beautiful in a sense. But that's the way that's the way that STEM sort of works, right? I tell people this all the time. It's like people kind of try to pigeonhole STEM into like these, buttoned up, old white guys, with like the, like you like it's like they have a picture of what it is. And I always try to tell people it is really not that. Like, the picture that they should have is like pictures of us,
Yeah.
because it's like we represent STEM, and it's like we don't look like those, we don't look like old white people, right? Or
Yeah.
old men, right? Like we are not them. Like we're fun, we're beautiful, we're intelligent, we're like none of those things. And so we are vibrant, we are, all of the things, and then some, right? And so that people have this stodgy kind of view of what STEM is just so like foreign and outdated. And so we want to bring STEM forward into what it really is, and really open people's mind to the possibilities of it. Is just such a beautiful and opening and stimulating thing. And like bring it into the 21st century,
Yes.
please. It's just like
Yes.
it's all the things and more. And I try to get people, like when I try, talk to young people, and people are like, it's like it's old, and it's like people are not doing that, and I'm like, you're doing it, right? Like, anytime like they're doing AI stuff, or they're using chat GPT, or they're doing, I'm like, you're doing STEM stuff like when you think you're not. When you're doing anything on your phone, you're doing STEM stuff. It's like you're doing STEM and you don't even know you're doing STEM. So I just try to make people see that it's everywhere and everybody's doing it.
It is. And I often talk about, that I think STEM is uh we're a hidden occupation, or and no one sees us, we're invisible, right? Like we don't realize the engineering that goes behind, like just turning our lights on
Yeah.
and having clean water come through our faucets,
Yeah.
that it's engineers that build the roads, the car you're driving in, the foundation you're wearing, and the lipstick. Like there's chemists and scientists, everything behind everything. And we're kind of we're hidden. And so it's really hard for people to see, because you don't see us like you see the teacher or the doctor or the lawyer on TV. And I think it's through these stories and through podcasting, these platforms that we have, that we can start showcasing, what are the possibilities, like you said,
Yeah.
in
I
STEM.
just I love that we get an opportunity to talk about talk about the careers that we have. Can you bring us forward to?
Yes, I'm going to bring us
Okay.
forward.
Okay.
Yes, yes, I'm going to bring us forward. Let's go. So my first job, I left Arizona to move to South Carolina, and I was working at a gas turbine factory.
Wait a minute. So you went clear across the country?
I went clear across the country.
Wow.
Never been there before. I accepted this job. It was a rotational program in operations, operations management, and I get there, and this factory is just enormous. Like, they have these long bays, long as football fields, and like, I'm so amazed. Like, a gas turbine is, I don't know how many size, is like 5-10 times bigger than a jet engine, and just watching it getting built and like it opened up and buttoning it together, I was like, oh my God, like, one day all I want to do is manage a factory. This is like the coolest thing ever. And so I reached out to other women. They weren't in that factory or at the site I was, but other women who had managed factories. And I was like, okay, what do I need to do to get there? Like, what jobs do I need to take? What skills do I need? Spill the tea, like, tell me, right? And so all of them, and it talked about, okay, well, you need to know delivery, like, production delivery, you know about cost, you need to know about safety, you need to know about quality, you need to be a people manager, right? And then they were like, in this company, it's also important to become an expat, like work abroad, right? And so I started focusing on getting those types of jobs. And I even got a job in Mexico, in Aguascalientes, which is central Mexico, at a it's called a maquiladora, but it's a textile factory there. The company had. And so I got the expat, I did all this stuff, and then I had a girlfriend, and she was a coworker of mine, and she was like, hey, I want to go to grad school, thinking about getting an MBA. My boyfriend's in Boston. Will you come with me to all the MBA informationals? And I was like, yeah, I want to do an MBA too, but I want to stay at the company because I love it. And but I want to do like a local MBA program. So you come to me with the local MBA programs, I'll go with you to the Boston ones, right? So then I heard about MIT had this program, which was a dual master's, an MBA and a master's in engineering, and it was a 2-year program.
That sounds
well, it sounded amazing to me, because I was like, well, I'll quit my job for 2 degrees, but I'm not going to quit my job for just one. Like, I don't know. That was my logic, right? Because you had to leave. So she gets accepted into HBS, and I get accepted into MIT. And so when I got there, I think the biggest thing that I learned was, up until this point, I had only worked in these factories, right? And I wanted to be a factory manager. I didn't really realize that outside of manufacturing, that I could apply my skills in other industries. Wow. I did a project in grad school with the local hospital. How do we reduce the wait time of the emergency room? It was 9 hours for a patient to get into a room, right? So like, that was interesting to me. Like, oh, it's an operation and I can do that. Like, I get that. But now, and so I started seeing like industries and things differently now, because I can apply my skills in other places. Part of the program is I took an internship for Zara, the clothing company, at their headquarters in Spain. And I was a data scientist, and Zara this is before data scientist was called data scientist, right? But essentially, Zara has always been ahead, I think, of the industry, not just in the retail and the fashion space, but also in their investment in technology. Wow. And I was building algorithms to determine like, where's the best place to sell the clothes, like what location, what store should it go to? Wow. And so, now it's like, now I'm working in retail, right? And it was just so interesting to me, like the different things that I could do. And it was because I was just exposed now to things.
See, this also, I hope that the people who are viewing and listening to this are seeing just sort of how broad that, you can, so you can go wide or you can go deep, or you can go wide and deep within engineering. There's like, it's the principles, right? So once you have the principles down, like there's like, you can go anywhere because the principles apply
Yes.
across all the spectrums and the, you know what I mean? And that's what I keep trying to tell people. I think I was watching, I don't know, I was watching something on YouTube the other day, like literally just the other day. Like, not like last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, the other day, like maybe 2 days ago, where they were saying, people get so caught up in like the roles, like the titles, like facilities director or director of this or project of the, and I can't remember what the lady's name was, but she was like, you know what? You need to start thinking about what skills you have. Start typing in the skills you have and start searching for those, right?
I
And
love that.
see what starts popping up there. And I was like, well, I'll be doggone.
Yes, because until when I first graduated undergrad, I thought like the jobs I was going to look for were called industrial engineering.
Right?
No one told me that I could be a procurement specialist or, logistics, supply chain. There's all these things that I could be, but if
Right.
I just for industrial engineer, it's very limited.
Right. Because you have more skills than that. Like
Yeah.
along the way, you have learned how to do all logistics and blah 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 and so on and so forth, because underneath all of the heading of industrial engineer, you have learned and mastered a number of things that have, your skill level is top notch.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was in grad school, the program was an operations leadership program. So we toured factories all over the world. And I got to see the Toyota production in Japan. I went to Hyundai in South Korea.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
I saw Bollywood studios in India, and then toured different factories here in the US, like Boeing and Harley Davidson and Ford, but also pharma companies and food processing companies. And, I'm just amazed by operations. And when I graduated, I got a job offer and it was based in Arizona, and it brought me back home because this whole time I had moved probably like 9 times in the course of 6 years. And I was like, I was ready to come back home at that. Um, the job I accepted, honestly, I accepted it because it brought me home. I actually kind of didn't, I was like, yeah, I could do that job. The job was to be a Lean Six Sigma black belt. And I was like, yeah, I could do that job, but it was more like, oh, it's my ticket home. Right. 10 months into my job, I got this note, an email of someone who wanted to meet with me. They're like, hey, will you meet with me? I heard about you, come meet with me in the cafeteria at work. I didn't know who he was. And I actually didn't even know how to pronounce his last name. And so when I get to the cafeteria, I just like asked them, and I'm like, hey, do you know who this is? And how do I say their name? And they're like, oh, that's the factory manager. And I was like, oh. And then they're like, that's him right there. And so the factory manager, I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's telling me, oh, tell me about yourself. What is your, what's your goal? What's your dream job? And I was like, I've always want to manage a factory. Like, that's my goal. And I was like, I just started in this company, but I'm not working in the factories. I'm doing this, other kind of job. And he goes, well, I have a job position to manage the industrial engineers. Would you be open to that? So I started working for him. And then a few years later, he got a new assignment to help start up a new factory. And so he's like, hey, I need a manufacturing manager to help me start this factory up and get it running. Are you interested in this job? So I got my dream job. And it was it was amazing. I had over 300 employees. It's a 24-hour operation. We had some of the employees, we had to hire them. We had to set up the factory. I mean, it was a greenfield startup.
Mhm.
And we got it to run, we got it working, we validated, certified the factory, and it was like the hardest job I ever had. It was the most challenging job, but it was probably the most fulfilling one as well. But what I learned, right, was like, once you get your dream job, like, you keep dreaming. You know? Like,
Yes, of course. What's,
you know,
what's next, right?
and so then before, during that time, I had gone to an event at work, and there was a leader who was talking about how he incubates business in the company and how he started this business, and the technology that they're building, they want to start it. And sounded so fascinating to me. And I was like, my next thing is I want to be a general manager and like run one of these things. And I hadn't seen him in probably like the whole time I was running the factory. I hadn't seen this leader. And I ran into him in the same cafeteria, which coincidentally, he goes, "Hey, Orietta, I'm expanding my team. My team is growing. We need to grow our revenue. And I need someone with an operations background to help me with that expansion, right? Are you still interested in coming over to the business side?" I was like, yes, absolutely. So I go and work with him, and it's within like the Internet of Things group. And so these are now devices and technology where, building solutions. And I took product marketing, I became, I was working in business development, product marketing. And within 5 years, I became the general manager for the vertical that focuses on hospitality, restaurants, and entertainment. And this happened right when the pandemic happened. Hotels all closed.
Wow.
Restaurants were like half of them closed.
Yeah.
Entertainment venues were shut down completely. But restaurants were the ones who were like, hey, I still want to service my company. They didn't have ways for like online ordering. They didn't have the technology. They're like, I need to get more people through my drive-through because they can't come in. I don't have workers. There was a labor shortage and they needed technology. How do I help with taking orders, whether that's a kiosk, whether, different methods of doing that. And so that was the work that I was doing. And I had a global team. The business was $100 million business in revenue. And again, like I had learned from operations, and I used that to then learn product marketing and business development and incubation, essentially.
Right. Oh, love that. So it's almost like so throughout your whole career, what I love about you telling this story is that you have learned how to sort of pivot, right? And you've also learned when it was time to change, right? When it was time to go. And this is one of the things that that I've been hearing more from women and women of color, is that it's like learn when it's time to go, right? And not necessarily when it's time to sort of like, like something bad is happening, right? It's
Right.
time to go. But when it's time to shift and move, right? When it's time to make that change, when it's time to just sort of like move for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Time to shift up, shift out, shift over, right? Because sometimes when we sometimes we stay too long, right? In roles where we're not growing. And that's not good for us either. It's about knowing ourselves when it's time for us to like, I've learned all I can here, and it's time for me to move. And I'm really happy to hear that you were able to do that, and you were in a place where you were able to do that. whether you moved so that you could grow, where you went to MIT and you learned what you needed to learn, you moved up, you moved out, you moved, you did all those things. I just love that for you. I did, it makes me so
And,
happy.
and I think, you're right. When to pivot is so important. And one of the things is when I was a manufacturing manager, my manager's great. He had over 30 years running factories, starting factories. And, I was like, he was like, you know what? You've learned like 95% of the job, like the job of being a factory manager. And he was like, the other 5% is you'll just learn that like across over the years.
Yeah.
But the bulk of it you had already learned. And he was really the one who was like, I think it's time for you. Like, you could stay here and wait for like, someone to retire or whatever. He goes, but you learned the job.
Mm-hmm.
And you could keep trying to do bigger factories or multiple factories. But he was just like, you need to continue to keep trying to grow and learn. And I think that like push too, I was like, yeah, because I was feeling that, right?
Yeah.
I was feeling that because the hardest part of the factory was the ramp part. And when it was stable, I was like, oh, okay, like it's running. I mean, there's challenges of running a factory in general, but it's much different when you're trying to just get it to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a okay, so what's left or what's next, right?
Oh, so well, I'm not done with my story.
Well, I know that, but
No, I'm just kidding. I like so I've since pivoted again. and, and earlier this year, now I'm working in corporate social impact.
and that is that. Wow. So how did you go from, I mean, because that's a shift.
It's a big shift. And, so last summer I was working with an executive coach. And so I've been doing outreach work since I was, I would say a kid, because I think I was in 7th grade when I was voted class president, and I served in student government all through high school. In college, I was like on the executive board of my sorority. I was on the leader of the Latino council on campus. I was a student senator at MIT. So this work, like I've done, and all my community service work, I've served on nonprofit boards, give back all the time. And so like, it's just natural. This stuff is kind of like natural for me. I've always done it in my free time. And so when I was talking to my executive coach, because I was in that spot, like where you talked about, like, what's next? What do I do? And then he said, hey, have you thought about, doing this work as your work and not making it like, your time? Because for me, I think, you talked about this earlier about, getting, looking for that title. When I first started my career, I was looking for the title. I wanted that manufacturing manager title or factory man. That was the title I was searching for because that was a job I wanted. So I felt in my 20s, it was very much about finding like, it was more the job.
Yeah.
Then the GM was the title of general manager. And now I'm like, all I really care about is impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that changes also, how you come to work, the type of work that you do. Right. And I think that only comes through a progression of, for me, it's been 20 years, but it comes with just time.
Well, I mean, yeah. And well, you've also, you've also matured. And so I think that comes with, your life and progression and stuff like that. And you know better, right? Like over time, you've learned, you've done the things, you've achieved, and you're like, you know what? I've done the things. So now it is about impact. It's like, what impact have I left? Will I leave? And all that stuff. So I feel that in such a way. I mean, I felt that when you said that. I felt that. Yeah. So tell me, what hastened this book though?
Yeah. So, in this talk, right, where I was like, how do I make a bigger impact?
Mhm.
Right. I mentor people at work. I mentor students at the university here locally. I interview high school students who want to get into MIT, and in those discussions, I just learn about what's top of mind for the students. And I was like, how do I just share more
Mhm.
in this space, right? How can I amplify this really need of with women and the isolation, specifically like in engineering, right? I was reading, NSF's newest data was, 34% of STEM professionals are women. So it's a third, which is great. But
Yeah.
when you look at social sciences, it's 60% of the women. When you look at physical science, it's 40% are women.
Yeah.
But in engineering, it's 16%.
Yeah.
Right. And 26% of college grads are women in engineering, but in the first 10 years, half leave. Right. And so how do I reach that? How do I reach them? And I a few years back, I was at a SWE conference, and we're at a round table. And there was this girl, woman next to me, and she's probably 1 or 2 years after graduation in her company, and you could tell she like wanted to just let out. She was asking the women for like advice, and you could just tell she just had no one to talk to, and she had been holding like whatever frustrations from work she had. And they're all the same frustrations.
Yeah.
It's the same that I had when I first started. And she's in like a small place, there's not a lot of women, you don't know, you feel isolated, you don't know how to ask for help, you don't know what help to ask for.
Yeah.
And and how do I reach them? do you know how do we reach her and all of them? And so I said, well, what if I just write a book?
Mm.
And the book, shattering the STEM ceiling, conquering obstacles and advancing as a woman in STEM. And that's why I wrote it. And so the book isn't my story. I think here I told you my story. The book isn't about me. The book is about what does it take to progress in the STEM fields. And you know, uh, I share stories of, my peers, my classmates, my mentees, and how they overcame certain barriers, right? And also highlight successful women in STEM, because I do think it's important to know, like, you're not alone. One, there's been people that come before you. You just can't see us, right? Because we're moms, we're caregivers, we're also trying to climb our own ladder. And not only that, like, we're also trying to fight for women rights everywhere. And so it's hard to spot us or to see us, but we want to help you.
Oof. I need to take a minute because I felt that. Still, I mean, and my listeners know I'm a mechanical engineer, also. So two engineers talking about this, and um, yeah, I felt that because it's so true. I mean, we're still fighting. Unfortunately, we're still having to fight these fights, because unfortunately, it's still a white man's world, right? Unfortunately, we're still out here in the trenches. Still, some of us are um, still fighting for raises. We're still fighting for positions. We're still fighting for our voices to be heard. There's still some of us who can't. I'm still having to have conversations behind the scenes. There's still women who won't come on my show because they are scared to tell their story. They are literally afraid. They have stories to tell, but they're like, I can't.
Yeah.
There are literally women who are like, I can't. This is still our industry, right?
Yeah.
I loved being engineer. I'm still an engineer.
Yes,
There,
you will always be.
I will always be an engineer, but there's still drama and trauma happening.
It
Right.
is.
So I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to that next generation coming behind us and those that are still in it to tell our stories loud and proud. And so I am so grateful to you for for coming on and telling your story, for writing this book, for getting it out there to the public so that another avenue for voices to be heard, for stories to be put out there. It's just, we need this on so many different levels. We all the avenues that we can get the voices out there. Thank you so much for just being courageous enough to write, courageous enough to be a voice. We need it because it's just, I mean, unfortunately, there are too many of us that are still fighting and struggling, and there's too many of us whose voices have been silenced and are still being silenced in the struggle. And it shouldn't be a struggle, but it still is, unfortunately. And I know we know, you know, I'm sure I know I'm thinking of a couple right now of our sisters that are still fighting the good fight. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be a fight, but are still, you know, going into buildings every day and they're, you know, and you're like, girl, you need to, I want you, you shouldn't have to be fighting.
And the other day was interesting. I had a reader. She she just started her career and she read my book, and I was talking to her and she's like, what do we do? Like, what do we do about this? Right. And it's hard because I don't think it's up to that 22-year-old to change company culture.
Right.
And we can't, and even, you know, women been fighting for rights for for hundreds of years. You know, it's not up to that one person. And I also think that just like we talked about, you have to pivot. We also have to pivot. Like, company culture isn't like a one person's thing that can change. And like, you have to be somewhere where you can be yourself and you're appreciated and you can grow.
Yeah.
And, you know, the retention number, that the retention rate doesn't surprise me. But you know what's interesting though is that 50% of startups in the US are women founders and 47% are women of color.
Yeah.
And so what we are doing is, like, if we're not finding the right things, we're creating it. And to me, that's inspiring.
Yeah. It's lovely. And we are doing that. We are creating our own spaces, own spaces and own places. And so the other side of that is that, you know, the other side of that is that now we need people to fund us.
Yeah.
So that's the other
Yes, it
uh,
is.
yeah, that's the other part of that.
No, exactly.
So
But the trend that there's so many now, where before it was like maybe 30%, I think that is what, you know, and we're seeing changes. You know, there are some changes, but I think we have to do it together. And it's not just women that have to do it. We need allies, and we need all allies.
Yep.
To help us, to help us, you know, whatever role we're in and industry. And I think part of it is also, I don't think people know how to be an ally, or what, you know, or what that means. And it's not always being a mentor, because being a mentor is, I'm, you know, helping you solve a problem or giving you advice. But being an ally is, am I opening doors? How am I stopping certain behavior? How am I addressing these behaviors? And, you know, or calling.
Allies and sponsors. See now we can talk about this. This is a whole nother episode. Yeah. Allies and sponsors, and I mean, that again, that's a whole nother episode, which we can do a part two. We can do a
Yes.
part two. We can do a part two. Um, we can do a part two.
We can do a part two.
Mm.
I will do a part two.
Okay,
But
so all right.
yes.
So what I want to end on it, well, two things. Tell people where they can find you. Because people, two things. One, tell people where they can find the book, and then tell people where they can find you.
All right. You can find me at my website, www.oriettaverdugo.com.
Ooh.
So it should be in the link, or it should be on the bio.
In the show notes. They can find it all in the show notes.
Yes. And you can find my book on Amazon, Shattering the Stem Ceiling. And I think, I would love if you, once you read the book, reach out. I want to hear your testimonial. I want to hear about it. What resonated with you? That is also important, right? Because I want to make sure that if I'm here to help, and however that may look, reach out, because I think sometimes we're afraid to do that,
I love that. When you guys read the book, please reach out to her. Are they able to do it on your website?
Yeah, you can reach out on the website.
Okay, so she's asking you guys to reach out to her on her website, leave a comment, let her know how you felt. Let her know what page, sort of, or what chapter resonated with you the most. Oh my goodness. I'm personally asking. So when I get my copy, I'm gonna need, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but we'll work it out, because I'm gonna need mine to be autographed. I'm just saying.
I can work that out for you.
Okay, so the YouTube channel is just getting me dancing around to dance. Okay. So there's got to be some perks to this job, so I'm gonna wait, because so I get an autographed copy. Yeah. Okay. So last question. I haven't asked a lot of questions, but this one is, of course, this is how we end every show. If you could travel back through time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her, and why?
I would say, keep following your instincts.
Mm-hmm.
Because my decisions in the course of that was something that came within that I don't know, you could call it your aura, you could call it your spirit, it depends on what people believe, but it felt warm for me when every decision I made. And so once I made the decision, I'm going to move to Mexico, there's no turning back. I'm in Mexico. When I made the decision, I'm quitting my job, I quit my job. And I didn't go back and think about, did I make the wrong decision? No, because now I could just focus on that decision and continue through it. And the other thing was, keep shooting for these moonshots. Being a factory manager, there wasn't, I was working at a company, and I don't know, thousands of factories, there wasn't too many women. And so having that goal really steered me into a direction to try to get there. And so I think, I didn't know that by me saying it and telling people that I wanted to do something, that somehow the universe aligned it,
Yeah.
And so I think we need to continue to share what you want to do, because you're planting seeds, and you don't know who's going to listen, who's going to call you, what's going to happen. Because when you tell somebody, I want to get here and do this one day, the universe is listening.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say, that has been my absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. I just have loved every bit of this interview.
Thank you. I love it. I love everything that you're doing for our community, and we have to keep telling our stories. The good, the bad.
Yeah, same. All right. So you guys, this concludes today's episode of Stimming and Stilettos. And as I do every single episode, you guys keep yourselves safe.